Today I had the opportunity to talk to Steve Viola, a friend of mine that I met last summer. Steve is a retired Navy SEAL Command Master Chief from the Special Forces, and he spent 30 years in the Navy SEALs. He has quite an interesting story, and he has seen plenty of things that most human beings will probably never be exposed to, and he's found ways to change his mindset and keep himself healthy, and he's had his share of challenges over the years that he's learned how to overcome, and he's just somebody that's very inspirational. And I met him last summer at this event out in the Four Corners. He gave a talk, and he was immediately someone that I wanted to talk to and get to know. He's very open-minded and very curious, and that's what this show is all about. People that are passionately curious and always learning and evolving and reinventing themselves. And we stayed in touch, and we've been sharing different podcasts and books and different things over the last year. And when I started to create this podcast, he was one of the first people that came to mind because he has quite a potent message to share. So take it in with an open mind and see what that does for you. Go to Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, and rate the show. That really helps people to find this episode and enjoy the episode. Steve, what's up, my brother? Thank you for doing this today.
Ryan, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate your patience and putting all this together and my wacky schedule and everything. So thank you for your time and your energy.
Absolutely. It's an honor to talk to you again. We met about a year ago, last June, at a cool gathering called the Four Corners that Deanne put on. And I got to hear you speak on stage. And after your talk, I was very intrigued by your message and connected with you pretty quickly. You're a pretty easy guy to connect with. You're likable, and you have some incredible adversity that you've experienced in your life, and you've overcome that. And I wanted to talk to you and get to know you and then share this with others and sort of help share your essence with other people, whoever ends up listening to this. So
I like your word choice. That's what I used to use when I was younger. Women sense my power and seek my essence. So that was perfect.
yeah, awesome. Well, I love that. But it is an essence. It's like, I'm sure you've lived many lives, it sounds like. I've listened to a couple of your conversations that were recorded, and you've got a crazy story, man.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think everyone has one. I've just been fortunate to be in places where I can restore myself as wholly as I can. That's been the whole mission here. I never really did all this stuff so I could talk about it. Or to be cool. It was just something that interests me, that curious side of ourselves, kind of like that 7 or 6-year-old that sees everything in surround or Panavision and hears everything in surround sound. It's just amazing. So, yeah, happy to share that with you. However you want to proceed, just let me know.
Yeah, it seems like you're very curious, and that's what this podcast is all about, is passionate curiosity and exploring consciousness and learning about people. And everybody has a different view, a different perspective. And you've lived an incredible life, and you're still doing that. You're still inventing yourself and reinventing yourself. So if I have it correct, I don't have the languaging down of the Special Forces or military, but you're a retired Master Chief of the Navy SEALs of almost 30 years. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you got it. Got it right. I did 30 years in the Navy. I did 28 as a SEAL, and then 26 as a medic or corpsman, and rose to the rank of Command Master Chief, and then went up to Deputy Force Master Chief, which is like the second in charge of the SEALs and stuff like that. And just making sure the force needed what he needed when he needed it. So that's basically just a glorified secretary, I guess, or go get this fetch and step stuff. But it was good. I got to see a lot. It put me at a strategic level that I wasn't, that most people don't get to see. Most SEALs are down in the operational level, and then some are down in the tactical level. And it's broken out in 3 categories: tactical, operational, and then strategic. So I got to work in all 3 of those environments, which really taught me that if you get the strategy right, you can flex your tactical and your operations accordingly. But the strategy's got to be the right strategy.
Nice. And that probably gave you a lot of leadership capacities outside of the military now that you can help other people.
I think so. I don't lead the same way I did in the SEAL teams. Everything's not the knife hand. Like you go do this, you go do that. It's more, hey, so share with me what's going on, or I never. It used to be what's wrong with you is what I would lead with. Now it's like what happened to you, you know, because some people are like just do curious things, and so you say, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? Now it's like, hey, what happened to you? Why are you doing this? You know.
Mm,
So I think that life
cool.
of service has helped me better understand human dynamics, even though I'm still learning them.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, and it sounds like you have that's a long time to serve in that capacity. So I'm curious, like, what even got you interested in that? Like, what led you down the path of going to be a SEAL versus just a typical service?
Just I was just graduated high school. I was pre med here at San Antonio College, and my mom, she says like, hey, I can't pay for your school anymore. You got to figure this out. So I said okay, and joined the Navy for the college program. Was 2 years into a 4 year contract, and just this, I go, this is horrible. I want to get out. Because being in the Navy is like being on a ship, or being like it's like being in prison with a chance of drowning. Because you're all wearing the same uniform, you're all in the same compartments. So I saw a friend of mine working out really hard, and I said, "What are you working out for?" He says, "I'm going to go to Buds." I go, "What's Buds?" It's like it's Navy SEALs, and I'm like, "What's a Navy SEAL?" So him and I started working out. I went and tried out, and that was in '89. Graduated in '90, and yeah, been doing it ever since. And it's just been always something new to learn. And one thing, being institutionalized for 30 years, as I call it, is it validates you every day. Either you're good or you're not so good, and you're told that by your contemporaries. So it makes you want to be a better person every day. We have a saying in the SEAL team is earn your trident every day, um, and some days are better than others. Let's just put it that way.
Nice. Yeah, that had to be some pretty ruthless training. SEAL training back then, is it a lot different then compared to now, do you think?
No, I mean the process is still as violent and as it's ever been. And what I mean by that is, it's the Pacific Ocean is always cold, and always the surf is always churning. That is a natural selection, or and evens the playing field for natural selection of people that want to stay or want to go. It's like, how bad do you
Mm,
want this? The ocean uh, puts you through the rinse cycle a few times, and you're like, yeah, you know what, this isn't what I want. And I think I was just, my upbringing. I had my mom and dad got divorced when I was in the third grade, and I didn't. I mean, my dad was around, but he wasn't always the best figure. But I had my three uncles who were amazing, right? And just so they kind of raised me. And one was a fire chief, one was a chemist, the other was a hairstylist. So I mean, you had these three completely different backgrounds, but just incredible men that kind of shaped me to where I am. And my dad helped when he was around too, but so I guess I had four dads altogether, so to speak.
that's awesome. So you had some good mentors that gave you discipline and helped you to have that ability to get over adversity.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of, to your question, what made me want to be a SEAL is just curiosity. Well, I could do that. If you can do it, I could do it. And then that typical 25-year-old uh, arrogance, if you will, or bravado, and just always wanted to learn to be bigger, faster, stronger, smarter. So that gave me the opportunity to do all those things.
Mm. And pre 9/11 and then post 9/11, you were in the SEALs already. So
Oh
did you get
yeah.
deployed? How many times did you get deployed over there?
So I got to, and you're right. Pre and post 9/11 was night and day for the SEAL teams, or for SOF in general. Special Operations Forces. Um, yeah, it wasn't a whole lot going on. Little skirmishes here and there before 9/11. Then it was everybody's going to the show type stuff. But I've been deployed 12 times, and three of those are combat deployments. The rest were, different types of foreign engagement or foreign internal defense development and stuff like that. So yeah, 12 times with 3 combat, and it was it was a lot of work. And you look back, it's like, wow, I did all that, and okay, what's next? And I don't say that arrogantly. I just say it with anticipatory excitement. It's like, oh, this is fun. Let's try something new. So yeah, I dig
Damn.
it.
And what kept you doing it for that many years? Like most people don't do that long of a career, right?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know if it was for me or not, so I wanted to make sure. So I was 30 years into a
Yeah.
4-year contract. I was like, my wife at the time, she's like, look, once you're out, you're out. You need to make sure you get everything out of your system. So I was like, Roger that, because I was going to retire at 18 years. Um, and that was right at 2003. I was going to retire at 20. I was at 18 years at 2003, and I was going to retire in 2005, and I had just gotten custody of my son. Uh, he was living with his mom in Italy, so I brought him back to North Carolina. I was living, and then met my wife at the time, and she's like, "Look, I got this. Go do what you got to do." And I was like, "Sounds great," So with that kind of
Mm,
support, that helped a lot.
nice. And do you feel like your identity at some point or throughout that 30 years got caught up in it? Because in the fire service, I've been doing it 20 years, and we got some ex-Navy SEALs and guys from special forces on the job, and it's fun to get to know these guys because they're a different breed. But in our culture, and I'm sure in yours, there's an identification element to it that's healthy and unhealthy. And I'm curious, like, what your trajectory was like as far as that goes. Like, in the beginning, you're obviously completely, at least I was, and most younger men are, that's you. And then you start to see patterns and you go, maybe this isn't quite so healthy to be like, this is me. And you have to remove yourself. At least I sure did. And went, I need to have a separate life and not let this be my whole makeup. And it happens with athletes and with different people. But I'm curious what your life was like with that.
Yeah, what a great way of putting that, Ryan. That is absolutely spot on. Yeah, I think most people when they first get in there, they absorb all of that, right? And then as you get a little bit more long in the tooth, you observe it instead of being absorbed by it, right? And it's like the best advice I ever got was from this Army guy I was working with at Fort Bragg. And he goes, look, man, the first 10 years of the military is theirs. You give it to the military. The last 10 years is for yourself, prepping yourself to get out. And when he said that, I really needed to hear it. I was like, well, he's talking about a degree or something to fall back on when you get out, because we're all enlisted guys. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean we all have degrees. And it kind of flipped a switch on me because I was right at the 18-year mark when all that happened. I was like, man, I just been going hard for 18 years, not thinking about anything on the other side of the military. So I started kind of developing another life, as you say, or getting away from that hyper masculinity that was unhealthy and toxic. And it's good. We need guys like that in that environment to do our nation's bidding. But there comes a point where you can't. It's unsustainable for a lifetime. The community can do it, but you as an individual, I don't think it's healthy. So right around 2003, went back to school, got my bachelor's, and then around 2014, about 10 years later, 13, 14, got my master's in international relations, which led me to a completely different place. It was through Tufts University, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and I got to meet some incredibly good human beings from all over the world, from Indonesia, from Thailand, from Tibet. I mean, it's just Mongolia. One of my negotiation partners, Mongolia, just a little gal, Sunji, uh, just worked me over like a rib at a barbecue on negotiations, just crushed me. Here I am. I'm a Navy
Mm.
SEAL. I'm going to do this. And then here's Sunji just crushing me, man. I was like, I had a lot to learn, man. So it was very humbling, but she did it with grace and dignity. So it taught me a lot about how to manage things, and you don't know everything. There's masters of trades out there that I had no clue about, so it just made me even more curious. So yeah, I
Mm.
I separated. I would say myself from the job probably right around 2003 ish. You know,
And then you still worked in that space for how many more years once you started to make that shift inside of your own?
was that 10, 13 years? So another 13 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And you
So
still found a way to relate to those guys and found a way to almost probably be more effective once you started to do that, do you think? Or it was pretty healthy shift for you, or was it hard at first?
it was both. It was it was very hard, but incredibly healthy. And, as with most things that you start at, you're going to suck, right? So I sucked at it initially and then just keep practicing it. You'll get better. But you got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, it was a great experience, and it just really kind of developed me into different avenues and different worldviews that I had. Um, not abandoning the core values or stuff that I've established, but just reinvestigating them, you know, and testing them and saying, maybe that's not going to work here. So,
Mm-hmm.
because to me,
Did you
it's
ever come
funny.
across, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I want to hear the rest of that because I can keep this thread.
Okay. Uh, you ever take, I forget what it's called. It's not the Myers Briggs one, but there's another one, uh, Gallup, the Gallup test. And it puts everything into perspective of who you really are. And my number one thing is connectedness. And you know, I know we'll get to it eventually, but I didn't realize how important that connectedness was to me in terms of how everything that's happened in my life, it's all connected, and it's stuff that I've, for lack of a better term, have given over to God or the universe or whatever word it is you want to use to just kind of be open to it. And these things have just appeared, I put that in quotations, but have just shown themselves, and I've taken the opportunity as opposed to just running away from it. But I like that Gallup poll because, or the Gallup test, because it was talking about connectiveness, restorativeness. God, I should know them. They were my top five, but those were my top five: connectedness and restorative. And individualism. So, that's kind of a paradox, collectiveness and individualism. And it's like, well, how does that work? It's like, well, you're all part of one thing, but you can singularly personify what it is you do to help showcase the whole group, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's almost like looking hindsight, there's a healthy way to do it and there's an unhealthy way to do it. And one of the healthy ways is what you're saying is to look back at all the patterns and predicaments you went through that could have at the time seemed like, oh, poor me, you're victimized. And you got to choose the relationship and use the languaging, which is so powerful, the story,
Yep.
and find meaning in it or create meaning in it. And then you start to see that, like, oh, these things in the future, when you start to go through tough shit or you're in a weird situation, you go, this is perfect. You're surrendering to it and you're realizing there's opportunity here. And that's a powerful thing about our human condition is like we have that little bit of will and it's to create meaning. And if you don't, that's how people fall into nihilistic or victimization. And that seems to be like you've looked at the synchronistic patterns with a little bit of our ability to do that. And there's so many once you start going through, it's almost mind blowing. It's incredible once you start to look at little patterns in the web of like, holy shit, every little decision changed my whole trajectory. And then there's like new humans, like your kids or whatever, that came from these slight decisions. And then you're like, well,
Yep.
cool, that means that every decision I make going forward is meaningful.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, man. I like what the one word I want to capitalize on is create, because that is really what human beings are all about, is to create, and we're co-creating. The key is just to try and do it in harmony, right? There may be some asynchronization or acrimonious type of behavior from certain people, but it's a matter of just creating something and just simmering down. Like before this call, I had to talk to my aunt. She was spun up about some stuff about a deed or a will or whatever, and I could just hear it in her voice. I go, "Hey, I can hear you're upset," and she just wouldn't listen to me. So finally, I said, "Hey, man, you need to dial it down." But I had to first acknowledge, and then I had to understand, right, and then we could move on to whatever the problem is. And I think that's with everything, like you said, creating. hey, acknowledge what your capabilities are, understand what your limitations are, and then get amongst it and do whatever it is you want to do in terms of creating, whether it's an artist, a cook, or like what you do with your breath work, which is phenomenal. And that's a gift, and I appreciate you sharing that with me and others. So continue doing what you're
Mm.
doing.
And thank you. I appreciate it. That's a weird learning curve, and I didn't expect myself to be ever teaching breath work or sharing it with people. But just like anything, just follow the bouncing ball and try to serve wherever you feel like you have the ability. And, breath is so powerful to me and to everyone. But to me, it became like, oh, this is something I wish I would have known about when I was a young child. And it's almost like an obligation to share with people.
Yeah, you're one of
Um,
those souls that found it and wants to share it with others. Instead of hoarding it, like, oh, I'm going to keep this a secret. It's like, no, this is beautiful. Because think about it, when you come into this
mhm.
world, you take your first breath, and then when you leave, you take your last breath. What are you doing in between, right? I don't know, because it's all you're a subconscious. You're not conscious of your breathing, and you need to be.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's the foundation of how you were able to get through a 30-year uh, career and in those intense situations over there. Even if you're not doing the yogi type, extravagant breath work, you guys are big time practitioners of regulating the nervous system. And so are first responders and athletes and anyone that's doing a high level performance. It's like the breath is actually the key because you have all the information and the practice and the tools and the resources, but if you can't access them because your frontal lobe or your amygdala is triggered, it's useless. And you've seen guys that panic, and I've seen guys that panic, and then it becomes contagious, and everybody around is influenced by either chaos or by calm. And so
Yep.
I've just learned, like, oh, my breathing is everything. And I try to tell the new guys that. And I'm sure you've experienced quite a bit of learning about the breath just through crazy, chaotic experiences.
Yeah, I mean, more and more to the exposures that I have to people like yourself in our community that I'm in now, and these certain circles. It's fascinating because in the SEAL team we used some pretty good breath. It was the box technique, the four in, four hold, four
Yep.
exhale, and then four pause. Right, and you do that four times, and so you just do that boxing, and it just, as you know, just lowers everything down, dials it back down. You get more oxygen to the lungs, to the brain. You're thinking a little bit more clearly, and now your whole body's ready to go when you need it to, as opposed to, like you said, the chaos.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I was going to bring up earlier that thread was, have you ever come across Sebastian Junger? I think that's how you say his name, and he wrote
Yeah,
Tribe.
yeah. I have the book. I've yet to read it. It's sitting on my shelf, but I want to
Hmm.
read it.
Cool. I was curious if you had, because he was over in some of those crazy war zones, and he was an investigative journalist. He's made a couple cool films, and he talked a lot about a lot of the issues coming back because you guys are in this, just like in the fire service. We cook together, we eat together, and we have this camaraderie where we have that dark sense of humor. And then you
Yeah,
go home and someone's complaining about the Wi-Fi or the groceries or whatever it is that your traditional family or friends or people in the matrix, the culture, that have no idea what it's like to be in a situation where they see chaos or suffering or whatever you've seen throughout 30 years. That's a long time. And so you feel this disconnect. And that's where a lot of our guys are taking their own lives. And that's why you're doing the work you're doing now. But what was your experience like coming back and trying to, bridge the two worlds? Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that's what Tribe was about.
yeah. So, what a great topic. I'll have to bring. I literally, it was in my storage unit yesterday and saw it, so I got to pull it out. So how fortuitous that you brought it up and I just looked at it, so I know exactly where it is. But let me digress for a little bit. Let me paint you the picture of World War II, with the guys that would go out and do combat and then come back. When they would go and come, it was by ship. So back then, ship voyages took a while, right? So it would take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to get home from whatever it was you were doing. And so, what does that mean? And to your point about live, sleep, eat together, all that, they could talk amongst themselves and decompress, right? They could work out what they saw and what happened to them there. Now, fast forward to the 21st century, and I was in a combat zone. 48 hours later, I'm home, and I'm still smelling like
Mm.
jet fuel, and I haven't showered or shaved or anything for 2 days because I just stepped off the plane, and now I got a 3-year-old that I have custody of that I'm supposed to, you know, be a dad to, and
Wow. I've
and
never
so
actually considered that, the speed of integration. I never even, for some reason, I've never even thought of that.
yeah, I mean, if you look, it's funny because I read it. It was either an Australian or a British uh, journalist who had first exposed me to that about how that integration piece, why you didn't see what you see now, is because you had time to decompress, right? Whereas with us, bam, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, and for me, it was really hard because, when I would see people in the burkas at the pizza parlor by my house, I immediately like, okay, that's somebody with that could be somebody with an IED on them, suicide bomber. And my wife at the time, he's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, nothing, trying to be cool and everything, but I still hadn't dialed it down. So that hypervigilance is one of those things that you really got to get a handle on. It's good in some regards, but not so good in others. And the big thing is just letting things happen. I was, my girlfriend that I have now, was walking the dogs the other day, and I was just into the dogs and how they were walking. And then there was some lady that literally snuck up on me and surprised me, and I was so angry. I was like, "How did that lady get the drop on me?" You know? Well, she wasn't a threat, but the fact that she was there irritated me. I was like, right. And then I just went back to walking the dogs, but I had to regulate that, right? So I know I'm kind of jumping all around, but the point being is you've got to have time to decompress whatever it is, especially to a traumatic event. And for me, it was rough because I didn't have a whole lot of tools. There was only a handful of Navy guys that I was with when I was stationed at Fort Bragg, and I surely wasn't going to share with an Army guy, right? Because that you just don't do that because it was the Army Navy rivalry stuff. But then as I saw more, and my son taught me a lot of stuff at the time at that young age, it just helped me integrate better in terms of management skills. So does that make sense?
Mm. And has the military or anyone started to create these like decompression spaces and zones and time frames?
So yeah, interestingly enough, I had left Fort Bragg and went to SEAL Team 3 on the West Coast. They had a thing what they called the TLDs, third location decompression stop. And the plan was to have everyone go to Germany, meet there with a psychologist and your friends and talk about the mission for 3 to 4 days, and then come home and decompress with the family and then go to Disneyland and decompress some more. The problem is the human beings are the problem, right? So part of the issue was like, well, I don't want to go to Disneyland. Just give me the money instead to go to Disneyland and we'll manage it. It's like you're missing the point, you know. Or guys, would tell the psychologist whatever they wanted to hear so they could get out of there, and it's just less than honest. And part of that is just the culture, and we're
Hmm.
not taught about breathing in terms of how it can dial you down, but how to get you ready for a mission. We're not taught about it's okay to not be okay, right? Because we're at the tip of the spear, go, 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 go. We're taught not to show weakness, right? And one of the SEAL mottos is if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Moderation is for cowards, right? Well, some guys live
Hmm.
that credo full tilt, and it's like, guys, there's a time and place for that. So I think the culture's slowly changing now. You asked me if Buds has changed at all. It has in that regard. The process itself is still as violent and as cruel as it can be because of the ocean. The instructors are better informed. The students are well nourished and monitored like racehorses at Belmont. Everything that goes in them and out of them and all this stuff. So it's a better program in that. So I think we're getting to that other pillar of holistic understanding for your emotions and the moral injuries that some people may suffer.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you and many of the guys that are starting to, like I saw a couple other guys at the Four Corners gathering, Jim Smith and Hendo, and these guys that are really strong, cool guys that have done the work. and they're humble, but they're also willing to be vulnerable and open up about this stuff. And it's a very powerful blend because the culture that I come from too is very masculine, and we've got a lot of guys that take their own lives or end up substance abuse or destroying their marriages and all the things. And it's becoming a shift because of the older generation, the ones that are willing to come out of the closet and go, you know what, I had a gun in my mouth the other day, or this is what happened to me, and I actually seeked help, and here's what worked for me, and here's what's working for me. And I think that's an incredible superpower, is to come out and be vulnerable, because it starts to breed vulnerability. And you can still be hard and tough, and we need those guys in that culture because that's why you're there. But it's so important also to be like, hey, I actually am human and I feel too, because if you don't acknowledge the pain and the grief, then
Yeah.
you're actually repressing it, and then it just manifests into all those things. And at the end of the day, you hurt because you love and you care. So it's actually incredibly powerful. It means you're a good man
Well,
or a
thank you.
woman.
Yeah, a good human being. It's one of those things.
Hmm.
What did Jordan Peterson say? If you can't visit violence to keep it in control, you're not a dangerous man. You're harmless if you can't do violence. And I think I'm conflating two different things together. But no, to your point, it is the old guard that's helping the new guard understand to be okay. And we had to start
Hmm.
somewhere, right? And like I said, I didn't do all this stuff to be cool or talk about it. I just wanted to become whole again. I knew something was up, and if I can help people along the way, that's great. Because all I can do is plant a seed. That's
Yeah.
all the best we can do, right?
Yeah. And if you plant one seed, that's powerful enough. Even if it's one person that's impacted, you saved a life, and you never know where that person's life goes and how that unfolds. So it's really powerful stuff.
It's true. Yeah, you never know what when they hit the record button and they remember what you said or didn't say, or how they were
Yeah.
treated.
Yeah, and I was actually laying awake a little bit last night thinking about this conversation for some reason, and I just let it come through, and I wasn't like, oh man, I try, when I get busy at night in the mind, I just have learned to embrace it as like, what a gift. I'm receiving these little downloads
Downloads.
or
Yeah,
visions or whatever, and I go, shit, this is a gift. And that ends up being a much better approach to, for anyone that's dealing with that at night, like restlessness, that will make you go to sleep faster than anything, is just to like not fight it, and to little side note, not fight it but embrace it as a gift. So I ended up sleeping really well after this. But what came through was some questions that are a little bit controversial, and you can answer them or not want to go there. But I'm curious about this stuff, and I know you are too, and so are many others. It's not like we're alone in this question, but the military industrial complex and the somewhat of a war machine that we can see we've become, that you at some level were a part of. We all stand for freedom, and you become patriotic, especially when you're young. I almost went into the military at 18 because I grew up in Sierra Vista, a little Fort Huachuca military base. And, when you're young, you've grown up with war movies, and you've been consuming this warrior mindset in our culture as an American young man. So I almost joined the military, and 9/11 happened a year after I was graduated. And I would have been deployed, and God knows where I would have been, and my whole life would have been different. I just chose a different path and went the firefighting route. But not until about 5 years, 10 years after 9/11 did I start discovering the possibilities of like corruption without getting too conspiratorial, or knowing what the actual truth is. We've seen it with the Gulf of Tonkin. We've seen it with different elements of our military and our CIA being corrupt ever since the 1950s when it was created. And it seemed like the Third Reich turned into the Fourth Reich at some regard. And there's a whole big thing we could unpack there. But I'm curious if that causes a lot of the stress for the military guys more than anything, not necessarily the trauma that you've seen over there and the suffering and all the things you had to do that were ruthless. And I can't even imagine relating to what it's like to be at war. But then not only that, to come back and realize you might have been a part of an op. I'm curious what your perspective is, because I could be so off the rocker, and I could be stepping on territory that makes people uncomfortable, but I just want to know because I'm curious.
Well, I'm what? So that was a good statement. I'm wondering, is there a question in there? What exactly are you? Are you asking me so I can better?
What have you discovered that has made you feel like maybe you spent 30 years serving a military, and at one point you're like, we're fighting for freedom, which we are, but we're also, part of a big drug war, and we're part of certain conspiratorial elements of
Okay.
like, man, we create false flag events and then we go to war on purpose. Like Vietnam is a good example.
Yeah, well,
We
you
go
and I
to
were
this
talking about
war
that
for
the other
money.
day. Yeah, we were talking about that the other
Hmm.
day when I was watching Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, the USS whatever it was that got sunk, and we went into that war, right? That was
Yep.
post Civil War. So yeah, there's all these events. Well, you know, I would honestly just I would initial my initial response is you're doing what you feel is right given the circumstances and information that you have at the time, right? So you're I don't want to say naive, but you're trusting and something is driving you, like you said, being brought up on whether it's propaganda or movies or whatever you want to call it, upbringing, right? That has a lot to do with it. Um, so you're operating under those circumstances with the information you have for the right reasons at the right time for the right purpose. It's only in hindsight that, like we were talking about the other day, excuse me, you look back and say, "What the hell was that?" Rumsfeld talks. Was it one? Excuse me, I got the hiccups. 1.2 trillion dollars is missing, and then the very next day, the Pentagon, the room that the Pentagon people are in, looking to see where this money went, gets torpedoed. You know, oh, it was a plane crash. Well, they didn't
Right.
find any plane crash remnants in there, right? And then everything, the
Hmm.
visual evidence that we could see were the two planes in the twin towers. Uh, so it's suspect. It's like, okay, I can see what they did in New York. Pentagon's another story, but it's all conflated into the same thing. And there's no pressure like peer pressure, and I'm sure you've seen it in your line of work. Is nothing gets more done. So when, like you said, it either calm is contagious, or chaos is, right. And so in that era, it's raw emotions, because you've heard this. You probably heard me say it before. Is we'd all sit back and watch a movie, and as it unfolds, the killer's behind the door, and the person's going to open the door, right? And you say, "Don't go in there, don't go in there," right? Because you have foreshadowing, or you've seen what's going on, rather. And we all like to think that we'd be that person, but what ends up happening is you get that knock at the door, knock, 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 and you open the door. It's right address. Let's see who's home, right? Is it your intellect or your emotions? And we're emotional beings, and we don't know how to manage them. So when you see something that visceral, it's going to throw you into that, kill them all, go do this, go do that, for God and country. So I the way I answer that is you're operating under under the information you have at the time to have it correct, right? That you're doing the right thing. And then as you grow older, it's like, wait a minute, man, none of that makes sense. And then we get into plant medicine, which reveals everything. You're like, yeah, I think I may have had some of that wrong. And then comes in the grace, the forgiveness, the ability to say, uh, I need help. I need something bigger than myself to help me better understand what I'm going through. Does that answer your question, or does that tie together
Yeah,
succinctly
absolutely.
for
I
you?
was, and I like that you brought up the plant medicine component, because right now I can see there's so much need for that opportunity for people like yourself, and I'd love for you to speak to that and what that was like for you, because it seemed to have really helped you. And I met you at that Four Corners gathering. That's what all that was tied to, was the psychedelic integration coaching and people doing beautiful work. And I myself have been in that space at least 14 years, where it's like transformational, beautiful.
Wow,
Got to
that's
find
awesome.
got to find some ways through it, but it wasn't easy, because for the first few years you're like, there was no word integration when I was stumbling upon those things. Now there is, and it's a big component, which is what you're a part of now. I think you're even a coach for being true to you, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you get blown out and you start to pull back the curtain and the veil, it can be destabilizing too. And so it's like we should really approach these things with caution and care, and not just rainbows, butterflies, glorify it and think that these are all good. And let's start with some of that stuff that worked out for you and how it went, and what that was like for you to use those tools. And then let's go into some of the shadow side of the psychedelic renaissance, if you're willing to. I can at least speak to some of where I want to go with that when it comes to like big pharma and the people that are investing in this space, and maybe the direction that they're choosing to push it and own it. And I think there's
Yeah.
something that's not so healthy there. But I want to talk to you first about like how was your experience coming out, and how did you find those tools?
Oh wow. Yeah. So my first exposure, I retired from the military December 2016, and then I was asked for a friend of mine, "Hey, I need you to go down and evaluate this medical protocol they're doing down south of the border." So I went down there and didn't know anything, didn't get read in on anything. Just go down there. Hey, you're a paramedic. Go check it out. See what's going on. See what it is. So I witnessed these four individuals who had very war torn faces and terse faces and just disgruntled dispositions, right? Uh, go in on a Friday and then come out on a Sunday through the medicine protocol like they were 6 year olds, and the wonderment of the world was all theirs. You know, seeing Panavision and hearing it in Dolby surround sound, like wow, this is the best fruit I've ever eaten, and you know, what I mean, it's just those little things that we take for granted on a daily basis. They were reacquainted with them as adults, saying, "Wow, this is a spectacular life." So I wrote the paper, said, "Hey, it's ibogaine is or iboga. Ibogaine is the primary that they prime you with on the Friday, and then the follow-on drug is the bufo toad venom, you know, the 5-MeO DMT stuff as a kind of cherry on top, and it really ties it together." And long story short, I said, if you want to save lives right now, this is what you need to invest in. And I just sent the point paper away. I never knew what happened to it till about, God, that was 2000, July of 17. And then I just found out in February of this year what the amount was. It was like $250,000. The guy had wrote a check just for me saying that because I
Wow.
gave an honest, objective opinion of it. So I did that in July, and then November I was eligible to go through the program myself. I said, "Yeah, I'm up for it." So I went and did the ibogaine, did the 5-MeO DMT, and uh, the ibogaine I didn't have a problem with. I loved it. It was very entertaining. You know, it was like having you had one big TV screen on the left, and then all these little TV screens on the right. And I was looking at the right, and if I wanted to see something, I would just touch it and it would come over to the big screen, and I could
Hmm.
review things. And some things were good, and some things weren't so good. But by and large, it was about 75% a good experience. You know, there's 25 that wasn't so good. Now go to the Sunday experiment with the 5-MeO um, DMT stuff, and that was ego death, right? And they call it the God molecule or the spirit molecule because you'll see God. And the only way I could relate it to you, it was like a blender. I could see, you know, they give you a little introductory dose. You have this little vape pen, and you're laying down. You're in this ceremonial room, and it's white curtains, and they're in white. And the I'm looking out at the Pacific Ocean in this patio overlooking the ocean, and I do the introductory handshake with the medicine. I inhale it. It's like inhale for 7, hold for 7, exhale for 7, right? And 7 seconds. And man, on that exhale, everything just turned into a kaleidoscope. Just it was a complete kaleidoscope experience. Everything just blended together. I could hear color. I could see sound. You know, it was just whoa, what just happened? They said, "Okay, you ready for this one?" So when I went into that one, I just I don't remember a whole lot other than screaming. Right? I don't even remember screaming. They told me I did, and but it was everything was like in a blender. It started spinning right down to this black hole, and I went into this black pit, and then came out on the other side. and it was streets of gold and the warmest sunshine I've ever felt. It wasn't like, being down at the equator where it's burning your skin. It was like, oh, this is, very nice. And when I came out of that for about, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, I could see people's auras, right? And everyone in that room had a gold aura. The other two auras I saw, but I didn't see them very consistently, was black aura or a gray, uh, and
Mm-hmm.
like a purplish aura, kind of a blue purplish. And it was amazing, and I just didn't know what to do with it because, I had some integration, had one of the best integration coaches around, and he helped me. But a lot of that stuff you got to figure out yourself. And then I journaled everything for like, I don't know, for the experience, and then for months after that. So it went on for a while. And yeah, and I try not to share that experience with a lot of people, just because if they decide to go do it, they think they should see what I saw. And I can't stress enough.
Right.
That was my journey for me. I saw what I needed to see. It's not for you, because I had one of my best friends go do it. He goes, "Well, I was doing it wrong because I didn't see what you were doing." I go, "That's just it." And what that revealed to me is how stubborn we are. We are so
Mm-hmm.
stubborn as humans, and it even says in the Bible what stiff-necked individuals, right? It's you can't seem to just let go, and let it do what it's supposed to do. So anyway, I'm going on a tangent there, but
No, I
it's
love
my
it.
experience, and it's just one of those things that I would, I hope people, when I'm asked about this, the first thing I always say is psychedelics are not for everyone. They're not. Period. Uh, the protocols that we have with big pharma, some of them are good and are effective, and some aren't, right? But some of them create other downstream issues as you do them. And I'm not here to poo poo on big pharma, because some of the stuff that they offer genuinely works for some of the populace. And then some of the stuff, it's just frustrating for guys like me and you and others that just have found no relief in those in the current treatment regime. So it's a matter of moving on to the next thing of like what works. And what I've learned is in 30 years in the military has taught me to be one thing really well: an observer, right? I was trained to observe and report back. So all I have for you is anecdata, right? And which means data for myself and others, but it's more anecdotal. I don't have the here's the survey, here's the blind survey, here's the 21 groups and the control group and blah blah. I don't have all that IRB stuff. It's just what I've witnessed as to be true and what works. And those medicines work for people that are in distress. And I usually tell them, hey, it's not going to cure PTSD. All it does is help you manage PTSD. It doesn't get rid of it. So instead of having a folder with all these sheets of paper spread out all over your table, now all those papers are back in the folder. You know where the folder is in the filing cabinet, so it's categorized appropriately. So if that drawer gets open and that file gets open, okay, you've walked into this. Here's how you manage this, right? Instead of it being pure pandemonium in your head and chaos in your mind. I'll stop there, subject to any of your questions. I don't know if I.
No, I love that. And it's hard to describe the ineffable, those experiences. You did a nice job to the best of your ability, and it can be very challenging to talk to somebody about something like when you said aura to your old community. Those guys are going to either blow you off but the beautiful thing is they also know you did 30 years, you showed up. It's not like you're just from the outside. So people like you can relate to those folks, just like I can relate to my folks about breath work better than a soft talking yogi, which is fine. It seems like we need to bridge the gap with the communities that we're from and offer the
Yeah,
things that we know work. And you're like all it's coming from is just your experience, of course. But you're going this. Hey, if you've got a gun in your mouth and you've went through all your options, consider this because it
yeah,
worked for you in a certain way.
yeah. And it's funny you bring that
So,
up because I have had guys literally getting ready to pull the trigger, and I just first thing I say is, look, let's go get your blood work done tomorrow, right? Tomorrow
yep.
needs you to go do this. Just give me another day. Let's do your blood work. It's going to be okay. But I never knew why people would want to kill themselves, and I get it now. When I was in decided to get a divorce and move on, that crushed me, man. And I wanted to kill myself at that point. I was like, and it wasn't because I was crazy. It just hurt so much, you know. It was
Mm.
such a pain that I'd never felt. I mean, I've broken bones, um, had my heart broken, but nothing like this. And then when you let all that go and you let it heal, you meet the next person that's going to help you heal, right? Like the girlfriend I have now, phenomenal, right? And I tell her every day how grateful I am for her and her puppies and just everything that she has that is just healing. And she's just being herself. She's not trying to be anything other than that, which is awesome. So I'm grateful.
That's
Like you
amazing.
said, gratefulness is a good medicine.
Yeah, gratitude is the ultimate medicine, right? And I feel like from what I could gather from your experience, the interconnectedness is something that you saw with your experience. That ineffable element is there, but you seem to say that the experience gave you that remembering, the childlike wonder, the awe, the interconnectedness of everything, and the magic is there. It's like, oh yeah, you forgot because you've been conditioned, and we go through life and you almost forget what it's like to be young and to be sort of blown out by a tree or by, just life. And it's so healing in that way. And I think that's part of what those experiences can be if done in the right setting, where it's not, you know done incorrectly or in a way that can be damaging.
Yeah, and you said a lot there because that's usually what I tell guys too and gals is set and setting is everything, right? So what is your set? What is your setting? Like in that movie, How to Change Your Mind, right? Um, and the book How to Change Your Mind that Netflix uh, had done a series on. The guy talks about psychedelics and it's set and setting. And anyone you talk to in that community, it's set and setting. The third ingredient is what are your intentions, right? Why are you doing this? And is it because everyone else is doing it and you want to be hip? And it's like I told you at the beginning, I didn't do any of this to talk about it. I just did it because I wanted to become whole, and now it's a talking point, which I would absolutely share with you. And I stole a line from a buddy of mine because he said it I think he was talking on a podcast, and but he goes, "Hey, we were trained to run towards gunfire. Now we're training ourselves to run towards vulnerability, which is huge." And because no one wants to be vulnerable, and especially in a military setting. What do you mean I'm vulnerable, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but in this regard, when we're talking about emotions, I think it's important to understand that setting and intentions are huge, and then guys in our community um, need to know it's okay. To your point, I'll never forget a really good friend of mine was going through the program, and one of the guys that was holding space for him goes, "Hey man, I love you," and the guy's like, "What's wrong with you, freak?" Because he didn't know what was waiting for him on the other side of the medicine. Is it shows you the love, the genuine, love that you have for your fellow humans. So, but we're not
Hmm.
conditioned for that. We're never exposed to it, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I can see that now there's a lot of hype behind the psychedelic renaissance in a way that you're wondering, at least I am, and most people are starting to go, well, if it's being promoted almost and pushed into the mainstream so fast, is it because of profit? And what are the incentivization structures that are driving the hype behind it? Or is it really genuinely coming because there's so much power and usefulness in these tools? And it could be a combination of all of it. I think it's a combination of many things, but I think people that are going to step into this realm should always consider the history first, and look at where things, because this goes back way before Pollan's book. And he wrote the book in a short, brief history, and he skimmed right over quite a bit. And
Yeah.
Pollan's great, and I think his book's useful for like a fire chief because he's got that rational mind. He hopped into it later. It's a perfect book for a guy like that. But how to change your mind is one component. How to change your heart. How to, there's so much more to
Huge.
consciousness than the mind, right?
Yep.
And usually the older elders and the indigenous folks that cared and respected and used these tools in a certain way, they went about it in a different way, and it was not about the mind. And it was much more about the heart, and it was much more, it was very much used in certain rare times, and almost like a rite of passage. And now what's happening is you're seeing people go from retreat to workshop, checking off boxes. I've got the psychedelic passport that's filled, and they're showing it as a badge of honor or a level of like hierarchy.
And there's
And
still a
that's the
douchebag.
ego being amplified. And and
Yeah.
so it can amplify. It's a non-specific amplifier, and it puts you in a super suggestible state. So if we're looking at set and setting, I like to now think of the set and setting being it's going big pharma route. That's a big part of the setting. And when you
Which is
start to do it in this,
well,
like you,
go ahead.
not saying it's bad, it's going to be there to stay, and it's part of it. And I'm not. I don't want to just trash the big pharma route because it has its usefulness. I used to volunteer for MAPS, and I've met Rick Doblins, and I've been around these
Oh, cool,
circles.
man.
And there's great people in these organizations, and I really tip my hat to the ones doing the work. Deanne's one of them. Amazing human being.
Oh my God, I love that woman.
But
She's
that
phenomenal.
she's amazing. Yeah. The the other component of it is just like, well, cognitive liberty. You go back to like everyone, like Michael Pollan sort of trashed Timothy Leary, right? And everybody blames him to be the bad guy that ruined everything. And at the end of the day, Timothy Leary was sort of opted by the CIA. He came to find that out and goes, I don't like what's happening here, and was being used just like many people were in the 1960s. CIA did some dark stuff with the psychedelics, right?
Yeah, with MK
And
Ultra and that whole
yeah,
uh,
some
op thing,
dark
and
stuff. And those programs almost were never discovered. It was almost like, let's sweep it under the rug and let's move forward. But because they were discovered, people know about it, which is great. But we shouldn't dismiss it as, well, those programs are over and now we can just move forward. We should question authority, and we should question uh, the nefarious actors that are going to get into this game, this psychedelic game, because if you want to alter consciousness and you're thinking of psychological warfare, which is what was happening with MKUltra, it's the most powerful way to shift consciousness in a culture. And it's so important to just be skeptical to a healthy degree about like, well, what is happening now with these
yep,
people? And even the
totally
people
agree.
that are going to the jungle to do ayahuasca, or going to a warehouse in LA to do ayahuasca, or any of these psychedelics, it's like, who's the person giving you this medicine? And what are they influencing you with when you're in a non-ordinary suggestible state? It's so incredibly important to be just very careful about who you're around. Who are you giving your power to? Why are we giving our power to authorities? And if you're going to, be very mindful of who those authorities are, because at the end of the day, it can influence your whole life. And um, yeah, I just wanted to start the conversation of the shadow side
Yeah,
of the psychedelic renaissance there, because it's important.
it's huge,
And I
man. I
think it's
mean,
because I really care about people, and I care about these tools too. I want to keep them from going off the rails like they have in the past.
yeah, and you're spot on. I mean, I just was talking to this person the other day about the exact same thing. Look, my whole mission, if you will, is uh, decrease the suffering, minimize the mortality, and increase recovery. Right, and that was on the battlefield, off the battlefield. That's just humans. But we're all going to suffer. So it's a matter of, you want to suffer well, or you want to suffer poorly, right? And this book I'm reading is called Struggle Well, right? And it talks about post traumatic growth and how things can come out of that. But it first acknowledges exactly what you said, the dark side of it. And, the inevitability of psychedelics is it will be commercialized, it will be industrialized. And I think that's why they're moving so slow on it. And I think people are smart enough to understand that they can see through the bullshit of, okay, I don't need to do 26 of these. Like, I got a buddy of mine who lives up in Austin. He just did one ceremony, he's done. I'm good. I got what I
Mm-hmm.
needed, you know? And if that's truly your intention, then that's what you're going to get. But it's to your point of the 20 ayahuasca and six. What are you doing? You're trading one addiction for another. Why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to you? Go deeper than just, like you said, that suggestive state. And the shadow side I never knew about, but uh, I'll never forget. I was doing a retreat up in Austin with one of the docs, and I said, "Hey, man, what?" They had this altercation with this individual, or something happened, and I said, "What happened?" Because sometimes the shadow side shows up, And I go, what's that? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It is a necessary thing for us to have. It's when it's out of control and runs point on everything that it becomes nefarious and acrimonious for other type of actors in there. But it's all ego driven. It's all pride driven. Look what I did. Look at me. I, me, mine. And it shouldn't necessarily be about that. I'm I've seen some people that embrace the dark side and they run with it like, dude, you need to go back for another sitting, because it woke up that shadow side, if you will, and they ran
Mm-hmm.
with it. I'm divorcing my wife. I'm quitting my job. I'm doing this. Like, whoa, 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 time out before you do any life changing decisions. Let's have a conversation, you know, and that stuff's not
Yeah.
going anywhere. Well, I got to do it now because X, Y, Z. It's like, okay, I understand, but let's talk about it, right? Let throttle back. Let's get in a position where we can actually discuss this, and it's not coming from a visceral side, but from both sides. And I love what you said earlier about the mind and the heart. We're all so focused on the mind that we forget about the heart, right? And I'm just now learning that. I'm doing this Joe Dispenza meditation stuff that's incredible. And I went to this retreat up in Utah for 3 days. It was through a foundation called Give to Give, which is phenomenal. Which is where I any spare nickel I have usually goes to them now, so other veterans and first responders can enjoy it. Uh, but it's a 3 day. That was a 3 day pilot retreat. They put on the goggles and you hear the music and you hear Joe walking you through the breathing and then the meditation. And I'm telling you, Ryan, I was like right back in the medicine. I've never had
Mm-hmm.
that ever. I was right back there. And I was like, whoa. And those people in the room had never done the medicine, but they knew what I was talking about because they had that same endorphin, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. They had that same experience in shared collectiveness and consciousness where it was like, whoa. So
Mm-hmm.
some of us are a little bit slower than others, myself included. I'm not dumb, I'm just slow. So I take a few more blows to the head before oh, this hurts, I should stop it, right? Type deal. Whereas, on an individual level, if people can do that without having to do medicine, that's another protocol that, like I was saying, psychedelics aren't for everybody. Maybe that's one of them, right? The shadow side and big industry of pharma, you know, the only politician that said anything about it was Kennedy, about how, hey, the reason the FDA shot it down was XYZ. He probably knows more about it than I do. I mean, it was more kind of a fact opinion piece that he said, but I love, and I'll send it to you. I don't want to paraphrase it, but I'm gonna. It was just saying, hey, the reason this got shot down is it's going to interfere with their bottom line, right? That's why a lot of it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's part of it, right? And I think this medicine should be accessible to anyone and everyone. I really do. But it shouldn't be just for recreational activities because, it's that whole if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Moderation is for cowards type mentality. Uh, that's that's the problem as human beings. Well, if a little's good, a lot's great. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You know,
Mm-hmm.
let's do this responsibly and respectably because, there's what is it? 1 Corinthians 13. Uh, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child, I acted as a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways beside me. Um, and how do you become that adult, let's say, right? Uh, by putting all that stuff behind you. And I think that's what the medicine does for folks that are wanting to go to level up, right? They want to go to the next level. So
Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with my shadow side. When I see it, I recognize it. Like, hey, I see you. What are you doing? Get in the box. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need you right now. So I think there's a lot to be still understood. And I like what you said about uh, that tool for pollen for fire chief type mentalities because of that upper echelon, the decision makers need to understand, hey, this is what this is for. Like I was approached the other day, hey, do you think the warfighter should do ibogaine or iboga, the SEALs, Green Berets, Delta Force. Absolutely not. Like, what do you mean? I go, it takes that edge off of you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I
It's a
still
way to
have my
disarm you almost.
bingo. And I said, we need those people on that edge. I said, now we can do, preventive maintenance with them, teach them breathing, teach them meditation, teach them this. And then if they do have a significant emotional event, okay, let's bring them in and we'll figure out a protocol. But it disarms them completely. You know, it's that old saying, rather to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener and a
Yeah.
warrior. And you'll make a lot of
I
those
love that
guys,
quote.
yeah, you'll dial them down to where they're ineffective for what they were trained for.
Yeah. It goes back to Huxley, Aldous Huxley writing about Soma and Brave New World. And he talked about a
Yeah,
culture that would just be obedient, compliant, and just medicate. And if you look at the way TikTok and social media, and then you add in the propaganda that's being fed through those screens on top of microdosing and just people doing ketamine nasal sprays and you name it, getting stoned because marijuana's, THC has been capitalized to 78% per plant. It's like everything's about ramping it up, ramp it up, and let's just feel good. And it's like, well, my perspective is that the individual is not necessarily the problem, it's the culture sick. We have a cultural sickness. And if you're in Japan, you don't label the individual a DSM person's depressed with anxiety. We got to fix the person. We go, no, you should feel sad, depressed. You should feel all these things because you're realizing that everything's corrupt and that you're a part of a consumeristic, the whole thing. There's a lot of reason to feel the negative emotion. And if you just medicate it without using it to find out like what to process and to heal, but now what's going to happen is everybody's raving about microdosing and raving about psychedelics and they want to just use them. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a bunch of people getting stoned and they're not going to be able to get activated and they're not going to be able to use the emotional response that would actually justify the activity. It can actually disarm our society as far as political activation or each person has their own unique capacity to serve and create ways of making things better. But if you just start getting high, that's when you have a problem. And I'm not against people having cognitive liberty because we have bars that serve people unlimited alcohol and nobody seems to care. And the FDA approves of it. And it's not like the government cares about our cognitive well-being, obviously. Otherwise, we wouldn't have alcohol being glorified on Super Bowl commercials and everybody getting hammered. Do what you want. But is that the reason why these drugs are Schedule 1? Is it because they really want us to be safe, or is it because they want to control the drugs and give them to us in the way that they want us to have these drugs?
I
And I
think
think
it's
people
the.
should question that. Maybe,
I
yeah,
think you're spot on, dude. That's a great assessment. I mean, I really like how you said that cognitive liberty thing. That really speaks to me in terms of how they supersede all that. Because in essence, they're already doing that with, like you said,
they're doing it.
And I love how you referenced Huxley on that. With, hey, here's your antidepressant, here's your anti-anxiety, here's your anti.
Hmm.
It's like, well, why don't we talk about what's causing that instead of suppressing it, right?
Yep.
Why
Just
don't we
another
get to
addiction.
exactly? It's like you're treating the symptom and not the problem, and it's like we need to address that. And to your point, I mean, that's going to be the 10% that do exactly that. There's going to be the 10%
Hmm.
that just want to have that woohoo, devil may care, caution in the wind, you know. But there are going to be those that want to be enlightened. Like, whoa, something happened to me. What was that? And they're going to
Yeah.
be curious. Like I have at least within this week, I've had 4 friends that are referred to the ladies that were there, that were doing the coffee and everything. Uh,
Hmm.
and so
Anna
they're, and Danny, yeah, both of them, right? So
hmm.
I referred my friends to them because they're curious, and they're all former military people. Hey, I want a microdose. Are you? And I did my whole coach thing, right? I said, hey, XYZ, why are you doing this? How can it? So once they pass those wickets, like, okay, you may now pass to the next gate and do this. And not that I'm some do all end all, but I feel that I have a reasonable responsibility to look after them and that. And to your point earlier, that was my whole thing when I got into this is when I told you about the decrease the suffering, minimize the mortality, and increase the survivability. It was also to protect the human. And then the next step is protect the trident, right? Guys that are wearing the special operations badge. I wanted to protect that. I didn't want to be seals gone wild, soft gone wild. Oh, woo, they're just having a good time. It's like, no, man, we're looking for answers because we've got some injuries that you can't see that we need to address. And I'm doing you a favor
Right.
by taking care of my injuries. You know what I mean? That's not a threat.
That's
It's just a
amazing.
matter. Yeah, it's just saying, hey, man, we need to find something. Something's not right. And I think that's as goes soft, right? So goes others. So goes conventional. So goes civilian, in so many different terms. And conversely, you know, some people just won't do it. Oh well, y'all, you're special. You have this. Yeah, we're human beings. We just chose a different path. It's like what's his name
Hmm.
says on Little Wayne on Heaven's Right Above It. Hey, we're all in the same building. We just have different views, right? So it's a
Yeah.
matter of like, hey, what's my view? Do I want to be in the basement or I want to go to the penthouse or somewhere in between? You just got to open up your aperture. And I think that's what this medicine does. But I just want to protect the human and then protect my community. And that's the soft community. That's what I've always wanted to do. And again, I wasn't here. I'm not here to. I didn't do it to talk about it. I can't stress that enough. I did it because I wanted to find answers, and I want to share them with people that are like-minded or equally as curious. And I hope that my four friends uh, take me up on that offer and they do what's right for them. Because I had lunch with one the other day, and he just started talking to me about a buddy of his that he grew up with that just died. And I mean, and this is a guy who I've never seen any emotion other than a smile even when
Mm.
it sucked. It was always like, now he's like, the grief was there. And I had the empathy for him, for the loss of his friend. His friend had passed away of cancer that he grew up with. But that was something that medicine did for me that I didn't realize I didn't have was compassion, right? I had empathy, but I didn't have compassion, right? And empathy is a noun, compassion's the adjective. So I couldn't extend compassion. From that, I estranged my son and some other friends, and I've since apologized. But it was just I had no ability to understand what does compassion mean. I can see what the book definition is. I understand empathy. I feel for you, but here's what we're going to do. So it was this numb feeling, and the medicine just said, slapped me around, and said, "Hey, wake up, dummy! You got a wonderful life here. Let's sort it out." I know I'm kind of all over the place. Sorry, Ryan.
Oh, I love this. It's perfect, dude. And, to have compassion, you almost have to start with yourself. And that's where it begins, is to really give yourself forgiveness. And then it extends outward where you go, actually, you do your own self compassion and healing, which helps you to realize that the parts of you that you see in others, if you think someone's a jerk, or whatever their judgment is, it's like that little bit is inside of you, and you realize it's pain and that's
Yep.
armor. And it's just that person probably has a huge heart. So instead of just writing them off as an asshole or a jerk, you're like, no, he just is suffering. And it makes you more tolerant and patient, hopefully. And we're all practicing that. We haven't figured it out. But that's the thing we want to amplify, I think, once we work with those medicines, is it's like, oh, man, we got to be a little bit more patient and tolerant. And it's like you should do these things less frequently, and until you pick up the message, and then maybe go as little reminders once in a while, not more frequently, and keep going back to the wishing well. And I even tell people, like you said earlier about breath work, is I didn't know this till maybe 11 years ago or something. I started to realize you could have, like you did at Joe Dispenza, incredible non-ordinary state experiences that connect you with all of that stuff that you can get from a medicine, but do it naturally, safe, effectively, free, and it's legal. And it also then will help you to learn how to navigate that with an exposure therapy approach, where you're like, okay, if you ramp it
Oh
up,
yeah.
you
Yep.
go in, and if you slow it down, you come back. That way, if it gets too uncomfortable or weird, you learn how to use the breath and navigate that experience. And you get to go at your own pace. Whereas if you jump into a medicine experience, you better strap on the seatbelt and surrender. And that's got its usefulness to it, but not
Yeah.
everybody's ready for that. And I encourage, like, people like my mother, or guys at work or whatever, that are like, maybe that's not a good idea. And maybe it's not, because you might come back and reevaluate everything you thought you knew about everything. It can totally pull the veil back. Whereas in breath work, you can gently approach this stuff, have the exact same thing, and then use that if you ever do decide to be in the medicine space, because you've learned how to navigate the realm a little bit more safely and effectively. So I think breath work is the first drug that people should try, because it is activating all of the neurochemistry that you're going to get from an external tool.
I love it. Yeah, you're so spot on, brother. Yeah, I I started this journey with breath with this. It's called Wisdom Dojo, and you do 10 weeks with them, and then you go into like a purple belt, and then I moved up to this Joe Dispenza thing, and I still do the Wisdom Dojo. And to your point, I did exactly that when I was talking to my aunt. I could feel her energy over the phone. I was like, she's upset that, and I said, okay, I can observe without absorbing. I said, and how do I do that? And I did exactly that. I was like, and I told her, I go, let's just breathe, take a breath, right? And she, okay, right? And then she just kind of got her breathing back, and then she started to calm down. But I had to do that to myself too because it was contagious. I was like, this energy was jumping on me. I was like, get off, get off, get off. But had I not had that, that breath thing, I was like, hey, just breathe, breathe. Because I was like, I could see myself taking a sip of air, another sip, right? And now, I'm tightening my chest and my shoulders and everything's coming up. And I'm like, oh, take a wrap off. Just take a wrap off, man. Getting wrapped way too tight on this. So I dial myself back down. I was like, and to your point, you can do all that stuff legally. And that's one of the protocols that I'm talking about. When I have clients, the first thing I tell them as a coach, it's like, hey, I want to do some breath work with you, some somatic stuff, if you will, right? Just an introductory thing, because I'm not a somatic coach. I'm by no means an expert.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a dilettante. I mean, you and the circle you keep are definitely the experts that I would go to or defer to say, hey, I don't know enough about it, but talk to these guys because you've introduced that to me. And the things that I find is my clients feel better just after that box breathing thing I was telling them about. They feel great right after. Like, wow, I feel really relaxed. It's like, yeah, you do, you know. But what happens to me sometimes, and I was telling this to a lady the other day, is that I can actually do it anywhere, anytime. I don't need a space. I don't need a place. I don't need a music. I can do it anywhere, at a stoplight. Someone just cut me off. Oh, I'm the lucky one. They cut me off. Lucky, I'm the lucky one, right? Just breathe. It's okay. And then I don't
Mm-hmm.
even remember it. And so what I'm learning is too, for my heart, because I've been so disconnected from it, is it's not a huge muscle movement. It is a fine, gentle movement to get that thing tweaked in and to get it, because the heart is gentle. It is gentle. And you've got to be able to just kind of maneuver into that space delicately. So when I see shifts, and through the Wisdom Dojo and through the Joe Dispenza stuff, I've seen like little clicks, like click, and I mean it brings so much smile and joy to my face. Oh, I felt it. I can see progress in it, and I try to keep that encouraging me to keep. But I don't go looking for it because then I get exhausted. Well, it did it last time. How come it didn't do it this time? Right? That's just the
Mm-hmm.
way it goes.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and then the part that you said about the breath is it's a relationship, and with your girlfriend or your kids or any relationship, it's all about spending time with it and cultivating it. And with the breath, it's
Oh,
something
I
that's
like that.
there, and it doesn't have to be this space or a yoga mat or any of that. It's more like just when you're chopping vegetables. John Kabat-Zinn, one of my favorite teachers, you're chopping vegetables. When you're in the shower, you're in the shower. Slowing down, and if you're paying attention to the fact that you're breathing, that is the most important step. It's not about changing it. That's next. That's the next step. Like, oh, because once you bring awareness to it, you know exactly what you need to do. You actually weren't breathing. Maybe you were holding, or maybe you were mouth breathing, or whatever it is. You can start to go down the rabbit hole. And I'm still a beginner with breath work. I feel like I've nicked the beginning
Are
surface
you
of it
kidding
compared to
me,
these
dude?
people that
You're
I've met.
awesome.
Well, I just know you once you go in, just like anything, you're like, oh my God, I've met people that have spent 40 years studying the breath, and I'm like, geez, I don't know anything, but I know enough to start sharing it before I'm a you don't have to be a master to help others with the beginning steps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like you don't wait. Like I always look at it like if I'm drowning or whatever, and I swim to shore, it's like now my job is to get in the water and start pulling people out or figure out a way to stop the others from get their head above water. You don't have to go become a Jedi master before you start helping people. And with
Yeah,
breath work, I don't feel comfortable still. Sometimes I still have imposter syndrome with it. Like, geez, who am I to be sharing this? But then I know in my heart that it's important and that the stuff I am sharing is more about just the beginning phases, which is the best part. It's like plant the seed, get people tuned into the feeling of the power of it, and then let them go and find different teachers and build that relationship with it. Because each person's relationship is going to expand from there. But it's
yeah.
the
Well,
most important relationship I think we have.
I think you're absolutely right. I like what you said about an imposter syndrome. That's humility, right? You're being humble about it. I mean, I've had imposter syndrome my whole life for different things, but when I look at it, I say, well, why would I feel that way? What would prompt me to? It's because there's so many other people that are genuine. Hey, you're genuine, like you said, with your heart, right? And pulling people out of the water. You're showing them like what you did at Four Corners. I was so bummed that I missed the whole session. I only got there for the half part of it, but just the whole energy in that tent was incredible. How it was just
Mm,
harmony. You had set the tone for harmony across what, 50 people that were in there, 30, 40, 50 people in there. It was just incredible. So that's contagious and people want that, right? And it's just a matter of, like you said, I love the relationship thing. I've never thought of it in that term, right? I thought of it not as a chore, but like, okay, I have to do my practice, right? But I'm going
mm,
to use that from now on. It's a relationship. What kind of relationship do you want? I love it because I really,
mm.
I'm fascinated by the breath and how it just can control everything. And it's funny, it's contrary to what I teach when I do uh, my business Max Per Diem, when I do my Stop the Bleeding course, right? The first aid course. And I said, okay, if you don't remember anything else from this course that I'm about to teach you, remember this: stop the bleeding and keep them breathing, right? And they're like, why would
Hmm.
I do that? I go, because if all bleeding stops eventually. And I wait for it and wait for it. Yeah, see, they'll get it like, oh, they'll bleed out. Yes, that's right. All bleeding stops eventually, whether you stop it or they bleed out. But what you need to understand is that that blood has the RBCs, and I'm preaching to the choir here. But point being is, in that you have to do it in that order in order to sustain life. Stop the bleeding, keep them breathing, and then I show them how to do both. But uh, the relationship you have with your breath is important. I love it. I'm going to use that,
Awesome.
giving you full
Yeah,
credit, of
you
course.
should. Yeah, hey, don't give me. I got it from somebody. Nothing's ever original, man. But it just works for me because it is an easy way for us to then not think of it as a task or a thing it's bothersome. It's more like, hey, it's spending time with with yourself and slowing down enough to even know that you have a breath, and then it to me it becomes like a habitual, it becomes a lifestyle where you're like, oh, actually when I'm hiking the mountain I'm paying attention. When I was walking my dog when she was alive, I would see how often I was not paying attention to my breathing and how often I was, and I wouldn't get mad about it. I would just be like, wow, 90% of this walk I was in my head, and 10% I was aware of my breath and I was focusing on how present I was. And it's like a muscle and it just gets stronger and better, just like balance or anything else. Over time you get these little, and in 10 years you're going to see huge shifts, but in 1 year you might be like, I'm still just as impatient and unaware as I was. But I think it's just a habit and practice, and it's a fun relationship now. It's not some obligation. It's fun.
It is fun. It's funny you say that because uh, I'm stubborn, and I didn't realize how stubborn I was. Because when I start getting irritable or upset or something, uh, the last thing I think of is my breath, and I know I can hear it. I can hear the little voice. It's your breathing. The little whisper. It's your breathing. Something's wrong. And I'm like, nope, it's something else. I'm going to focus on this. And after this, whatever meeting I'm having, this meeting of the mind, so to speak. It's like, you know what? It is my breath. Just stop being so stubborn and thinking, a cup of coffee is going to help you, or this is going to help you, and I don't mean a crutch. It's just, my posture is different, or I've got a hip issue. I'll stretch that out, or I'll go do yoga. It's your breathing, stupid. Just
Mm,
breathe. It's that
I
simple.
love
And
that. And the way
I
that you seem to have protocols and you follow these, like you said, if everybody bleeds out eventually, so address that first, you could almost help me in a way to start using that as your mantra. But go, everyone is going to stop breathing eventually. So address the breath first, and that would be like the nervous system manager of everything else. So I'm going to use that in my own way because I like to have systems of thought. Because if you don't triage what to focus on, it becomes messy. And so
yeah,
you're really good at that.
overwhelmed.
Obviously, you've done it for, yeah. So we're just looking for systems, and addressing the breath first helps us to be more present, and then we know exactly what to do if we're paying attention to our own nervous system and the environment that we're in. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all after, is to be more lucid and more present with our experience instead of in our head. And it's not some, woo woo thing. It's reality. It's our attention is our life force energy. And it's like, if we bring it to the breath, it controls our state. And I always throw gratitude into it as my first approach to what do I pay attention to. It's like, oh, I'm breathing. Thank you for
Yeah.
that, universe, God. And the fact that you're alive and awake and aware is a gift. And so I like to focus on the fact that I'm breathing with gratitude. And that puts you in a state, which is an amazing medicine. And then guess what? That interaction on the road or with guys at work or whatever it is so much better because you're there. And you're going to
Hmm.
get off and go in and out of this, but it's like, what a cool, simple practice that is so effective. And it's probably the most important practice I think I've ever found. So, anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because it
No,
seems like
I
you have
agree.
systems of thinking.
I agree. The one thing I would add into that, and I love how you do it, and this is one thing I could appreciate for you. I'm sure the people that encounter you is your humor, right? Uh, it's when you put a sprinkle of humor on stuff, it just changes the entire aspect of everything. And it's just it's people are hilarious if you let them be. You know what I mean? And if you're
Yeah.
not looking for, I need this response for X, Y, Z. It's like, just, hey, I need X, right? Or hey, I need this, and they'll give
Yeah.
you, well, here's LMNOP. Oh my God, I never would have thought of that. Thank you, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
hilarious sometimes if you let them. You dial back the pressure and just let them do it. But humor goes such a long way, right? And like when I
Mm.
teach, I go, look, I do not take myself seriously at all, right? I don't do that anymore because I was so serious, no one else could take me serious because I took it all, right? And now, but what I do, I take serious, right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to be
Mm.
executing it perfect. I strive for that, but I want to be able to get there, and I want to leave space for play, right? I want to be able to play in that space. So I think
Mm.
people get so overwhelmed, like you said, without triaging it, and they forget to play sometimes. It's okay to play. Like my girlfriend, she's all
I love
serious.
it.
She was a chemistry teacher and then a biology teacher. Now she's a dentist, I'm always interjecting. I go, this is hilarious. I'll send her something from Instagram or Facebook. It's like you and I think things are, you think the things that we don't find humor in the same thing. I go, that is not true because it's about 60-40. 60% we do, 40% we don't. But I say that just because relationship wise, it all comes together, with when you laugh, what happens? You get a belly laugh, right? And right, what are we taught is you have the belly breath and then breathe with your chest, right? The inhale belly, inhale chest, take another sip. Now we're full, and then exhale, right? And I learned so much. Like my girlfriend has going to be 9 grandkids, and I learned, and they're all under the age of 7. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, she's got 8. Yeah, she's got 8 right now. Ninth one's coming on the way, and they're 8 under 7 years of age. And I learned from each and every, and they love me. They call me the penguin, right? Because I jump in the pool with them, or I'll do stuff, and it's like the emperor penguin telling them do this, do that, and the little penguins do it. The little chicks. So they teach me. The teacher in me and the student in me shows up, and that's what I'm learning from you right now. The teacher in me and the student in me showing up for you, and I can't thank you enough for that. It's beautiful.
Oh, it's mutual. This has been fun. And I love that because kids are our best teachers. They're beginner's mind. And we're all trying to get back to that unlearning and remembering, dude, let's have some fun and be joyful and not take things so serious. We've beaten that into people. And there's a time to be serious, and I can get real serious. But when it comes to connecting with life and with people, even the plant medicines, when you're in those journeys, I found what you were saying to be the ultimate tool is humor. When
Oh
it
my
gets
God.
weird or uncomfortable, it's like, man, let's remember this thing is weird. And
Yeah.
life is weird and I'm weird and that makes it so much more playful, and then it can be why was I getting so pent up? Oh, because of my conditioning and my programming. And so we should be able to play and have fun, and I love that. So
It's true. I mean, my Ibogaine experience, I had a Rastafarian penguin, like from the movie Surfs Up, was my spirit guide, and I was like, "Am I supposed to take this serious?" And so that was the first. And then when I did my ketamine journeys, right, it was a jaguar. It was a female jaguar. And how did I know it's female? I didn't see the genitalia. I could feel the energy. The energy from a female is completely different. It's healing. It's nurturing. It's they're portals to bring life into this world. They have a different vibe, man. So this jaguar has shown me all this stuff, and just like let me know when you're done being stubborn, because I got some other stuff for you to see. And so yeah,
amazing.
it's that humor is amazing. And the kids, like one of the little girls, Emery, I always ask her, she's 5. I say, Emery, what's the secret of happiness? She's like, I'm not telling you, because they know the secret of happiness. You just got to ask them; they'll tell you. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. They're almost like it's not a secret.
Yeah,
they're
that's exactly right.
they're just
It's
happy.
Yep.
That's awesome. So I have a question that I ask everyone, and it's not dark at all to me. I think it's important and it's beautiful and it inspires. Just a more authentic answer of what means most to you is, if you were going to die today, what would you want to share? If this was the last thing you were going to share with
Oh
people?
my gosh, uh, that's a good question. What would I want to share? I think I already said it, man. It has some humor. You know, Death comes for all of us. It's inevitable, but have fun. You know, don't be irresponsible, but just to have fun along the way. Create. The higher the ambition, the higher the intellect, the more need for play there is. Right. So we forget to play. Just go play somewhere and have a good time and just relax, man. It's gonna be all right. None of us are getting out of here alive, so just have fun while you're here and do it responsibly. And well, then that's not fun. Well, okay, I'm not trying to be judgy or you know totalitarian dictator. I'm just saying have fun, find a place to play, and find others that want to play with you. If not, play by yourself. That's fun too.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, playfulness. And I got that from you the first time we met at Four Corners. You got off the stage and came over. You're a lighthearted, easy to connect with guy that's genuine, authentic. And I was like, I can't wait to get to know you more. And this has been really fun, man. And I look forward to
Yeah,
getting to know you more. You're a cool human being.
likewise, and thank you for when
So
when we emailed back and forth, and I sent you that stuff, and you sent me that stuff. That's been wonderful. So thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. And keep sharing cool stuff with me, because I love learning and being exposed to new ideas. So, well, I appreciate this time. I guess we'll end this now, and I'll hope to see you again in the future. Maybe we'll do another Four Corners gathering or something.
Yeah, I was just talking to Deanna about that the other day because I just texted her out of the blue. I said, "Hey, man, I'm just thinking about you, and I want you to know what you're doing is incredible, and I love you to pieces. Anything you need, how can I contribute? Let me know. Thank you for what you're doing because she's creating an army of coaches because she sees what's coming.
Hmm.
The whole, like you said, industrialization, or maybe I said it about the psychedelics. There's got to be people that can help manage that transition. So good on her. She's ahead of her time for
Yeah,
sure. But yeah, she said she
absolutely.
was
It's
thinking
cool to
about
be
doing one next
connected.
year. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Great
that would be
network too.
awesome. Yep, good way to network with neat people. And if I don't see you then, maybe I'll even see you before then. Who knows? But we'll stay in touch.
And you're in Arizona, right?
Yep,
Tucson or Phoenix?
I'm in Phoenix, pretty close to downtown.
I usually go
So
through Tucson. I don't necessarily go to Phoenix, but next time I go through Arizona, I'll definitely make it a point to see you.
cool. You got a place to stay.
Sounds good.
All right, brother. Yeah. Thank you for listening to the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, and rate the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode.